political grounds, that's fine, but it will not be that she lost because she was not qualified to. And maybe that says more. Now, would I miss her? I would. I think she's been a fantastic finance minister. I think she came in at a time when we needed fiscal discipline and fiscal consolidation. I think many Nigerians are secretly praying that she doesn't get the job. Because, well, we would like her to have it because everybody is worried about what will happen.
Yep.
Now, this is not to say that there's any single person that's indispensable. My personal view is, much as I would like to have Ngozi as finance minister, she'll be far more useful to Africa, to the developing world, as the president of the World Bank. I think it's an opportunity to make a statement. Now, would one person necessarily change the World Bank? No, but the World Bank itself has been changing, and we've got to be fair. People like President Zelek has moved the World Bank away from the old right-wing orthodox World Bank into a more compassionate, development-oriented institution. And I think that process needs to be continued. Dr. Kim is a brilliant doctor. He's got a passion for poverty. He's worked in developing countries. Dr. Ocampo is a brilliant economist. He's worked in finance. These are three candidates that have fantastic CVs, but in terms of who is the most suitable for this role, I think it's clear that Ngozi is. Again, we don't know if she'll get it. I think the general vibes are, if the Americans want it, they will get it. That is true, actually. And I don't know, I suppose in America I can afford to, this is America after all, so I can say what so that's it. Okay, the first question on Boko Haram. I have a degree in Islamic law, and I've also studied a lot of these movements. In most religions, and Islam is one of them, you've always had a lunatic fringe that believes its own interpretation of religion is the only correct interpretation. And those of you in Uganda know of the Lord's Resistance Army that wants to set up a government based on the 10 Commandments. Now, that is one side of the story. We live in a world in which, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we all retreated to identities. It's about Islam versus the West. It's about Jews and Arabs. It's about Muslims and Christians. It's about ethnicity. People no longer talk about ideology. And this is the world in which all the conflicts emerge. You add on top of that horizontal inequalities. Vertical inequalities, we know, they led to the socialist revolutions, difference between rich and poor. Horizontal inequalities are not the major reason for social unrest, where certain people, either belonging to a religion or belonging to a region, find themselves to be poor as a group relative to other regions, and then you've got discontent. Boko Haram, just like the Niger Delta crisis before it, was a situation in which people exploit discontent. People exploit poverty. People exploit joblessness. People exploit a general lack of hope, and then play up identity, be it religious or ethnic, and then turn it into violence. How is that addressed? Short term, there has to be a military and intelligence solution. You can't just let people bomb people, so you've got to deal with it. But long term, there has to be an economic solution. Because so long as people are poor, if it's not religion, it will be ethnicity, it will be something. Okay, there will be something that will be used as as a basis for violence. So it's a very difficult period for us as a country. I think a lot of progress has been made on the military intelligence side. I think some of the key members have been arrested. Some of the you can't stop all the bombings immediately, but you've seen a marked slowdown in the bombings. And of course, there are questions as to how many of these bombings are really Boko Haram and how many of them are just people claiming to be Boko Haram. Because anybody can pick up the phone and say, I'm Boko Haram, and that's it. Okay. So that on the military intelligence side, I think we've made a lot of progress. On the economic side, I think there is a general recognition that across the country, you cannot continue to have a nation that is the second largest economy in Africa with so much poverty. And what we do on agriculture, what is happening with the power reforms, what's happening with infrastructure, would hold the key to future social and political stability. The only thing I can say, being in government, is that nobody in government underestimates the importance of a more even economic development vertically and horizontally, and the critical importance of that for social and political stability. And that is integral to government economic policy. So we will go through these difficulties, and I was saying yesterday in Washington, bombs, I mean, this is a very sad incident, but you know, if you condemn the country because of bombing, nobody will come to the United States after 9/11, or London after July 11th. I mean, these things happen. You can't predict some of these things. Okay, you can learn from that. Okay, and try to address the issues going forward. And I think as a world, we need to continue with this level of education. Now, finally, the Muslim community itself in Nigeria has to address the doctrinal ideological issues. Everywhere, that is what happens. If you have a group with a religion that uses the religion to preach a particular form of violence, it is for the community, the Muslim community itself, to isolate that group and show that this is not representative of our faith. Now, that is a bit difficult now, because if a scholar stands up to condemn Boko Haram, he's probably dead the next day. Okay, so you've got to get to a point where you've got the security around the vast majority of people so that they can win the battle of, because the greatest danger is to have more and more young people believe that this is the correct interpretation of their faith. And to stop that, you've got to protect and ensure that there's security for those who are ready to stand up, okay, and explain to young people that this is not Islam. This is just a group of misguided, violent elements, okay, without fearing for their lives the next day. I think that is that's all I'll say to that. But we've not been in this space in a long time. I think we've moved a lot forward as far as security is concerned. The final question is on regionalization. You know, I think we should get to think of Africa as one big economy. Okay, I'm not talking about having a common currency. I know the African heads of state want a common currency, by the way. And there's supposed to be an African Central Bank, and I'm chairman of the steering committee of the Central Bank. And we're still thinking and researching and reporting. And after the Euro, I think we're going to think for a long time. but we're very loyal public servants. So since the heads of state want a currency, officially the central bank governors want a currency. And we continue to advise them on how to do it. But long before you get to a common currency, we've got to think of integration through communication. Why is it easier for me to just drive to Lagos airport on any night, and I know that I can get any number of flights out to the UK and to the United States, than to fly to another part of Africa? Why is it cheaper to transport goods from China to a port in Africa than to transport them from one country to another in Africa? Why can't we link Africa by rail? Why can't I get on a train in Johannesburg and drop off in Yaoundé? Why can't I produce goods in Rwanda and put them on a train to Nairobi? Why not? If we actually connected Africa by rail, by ports, airports, and then have those gas pipelines, we have one market. There are goods that are produced in different parts of Africa that don't get out of those countries. Why can't textiles from Nigeria go all over the world? Why not? Why do you need to get textiles from China? And so I'm a strong believer in that, but linking Africa first through the rail lines, through the roads, through the ports, the infrastructure is the first point. We can think of the currency later, the Afro.
Three more questions. First, gentleman.
Get in the front row.
Right here too. Nick?
May I remind Nick that I'm gender friendly. I haven't seen.
Lady. That's what.
Thank you. I'm a journalist from India, and it's a little embarrassing to hear that our former colony is now acting like a colonizer in Africa. But I had a couple of questions. You make this very vigorous case for reducing fuel subsidies, and you say that in the medium to long term, that is a much better solution. In the short term, do you have any thoughts on how it can reduce hurt in all these very poor people in Nigeria? That will impact their daily lives in a big way. So how do you take care of that? And secondly, do you have any advice for your neighbor in Eastern Africa, Uganda, which has discovered oil reserves a few years ago and now is going through the whole process of going towards oil development? What are 2 or 3 of the big things that they need to do so that they don't that they avoid your mistakes? Thank you so much.
Hello, Governor Sanusi. It's an honor to have you talk to us today. My question actually goes back to the oil subsidies and your talk of, I guess, economic disparity in Nigeria. I know some of the arguments that have actually been put up for actually having oil subsidies is in West African countries or African countries where you have a reasonable amount of corruption. Ultimately, or sometimes, the only real benefit many people actually see from a country being the second biggest economy in Africa is cheap oil. And ultimately, I know it is a toss-up between, I guess, trying to weed out the corruption in the system, but for somebody who's right at the bottom of the food chain, if oil prices go up, ultimately he might not see the benefits of you weeding out corruption, and oil prices would have shot up. I'd just like to say I'm Ghanaian, so it's not a case of me taking any sides. I'm just curious to hear your opinions.
2 more questions in this round. The lady in the middle,
First, I'd like to thank you for your humanity on top of being a banker and a scholar for everything. And I've been an African life for over 30 years now. Through both in Cameroon and in the United States, and my question is something I've never been able to figure out, and you as a banker may be able to explain it to me. How does the CFA franc exist, especially since the euro has taken over Europe? How can we still have a currency that is so fake that it is dependent on a currency that doesn't even exist anymore? And that I just don't understand. And I'd also like to find out what happened to Peugeot. We used to have a Peugeot, I go fair. That was the best car I ever had.
Thank you. I must really thank you for your wonderful question. I had the opportunity to talk to the editor of the Muslim Community Report, the scramble to get somebody to represent them and to come to this event. Just a few blocks from here is Harlem. I've been making a major effort in a number of different venues in order to get big-time, world-class public relations for Nigeria out of New York, and then we can get to Washington. I feel that the image of Nigeria has to be really burnished for the kinds of things that you're saying. The investment climate is being too much guided by negative publicity, and I would like to entertain whatever thoughts you may have that the diaspora here, not just the Nigerian diaspora, could take the baton and really run with it, because it's a good time to be an African in New York, and we've got to get that message across.
Thank you for your presence, Governor. My name is George Oboge, second year at Wharton School. And I'm glad to say I started my banking career the same year you joined UBA, in 2007. And my question still goes around the issue of transparency. One of the challenges we faced in UBA then was the issue of faceless debtors in the bank. And up until now, we don't have a consumer credit rating agency in Nigeria. As the CBN governor, what are you doing to see this come to light? And also, the issue of microfinance and the issue of mobile money. I think the biggest challenge in that space is having a common platform where the various parties in that space can interact, a kind of a central clearance system. How much of an influence do you think your bank can play, and how do you intend to facilitate that happening? And thirdly, the issue of the issue of leadership in Nigeria, I think for me, is the biggest question. I'm glad that this regime has credible individuals like you to play a part in the government. But what happens when this president leaves and the vacuum is created again? Are you considering running for public office?
Thank you so much for coming today. My question was more on sociology, I guess. I was really heartened and inspired to hear what you had to say about inclusion of women in the economy, but I want to know what other policies besides preferential lending do you have in mind, such as greater equality in childcare and family raising that could help bring that about, as well as getting men on board. You said that men sitting in the central bank might not be thinking about women, but how can we get that to happen too? Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that there are two questions that have to do with the fuel subsidy and poverty. Now, the thing with any kind of subsidy is that when it's removed, obviously it shrinks the budget line, and people find that their real incomes are affected. Now, part of the communication challenge with fuel subsidy is that people don't understand who is paying for it. If you pay 2 trillion naira in a year, if the government pays 2 trillion naira in a year and borrows, what we're doing is borrowing from our children and our grandchildren to subsidize our life today. And that is the big economic issue for us. Somebody is going to pay back that money plus interest. And if it is not sustainable, we'll get to a generation where the subsidy has to be removed and they've got to pay the debt. There is no way a country like Nigeria can tell 167 million people that no matter what the international price of oil is, no matter what the exchange rate is, you will not pay more than X amount per liter. we had 65 naira per liter. And this was a price fixed when oil price was maybe $50 a barrel. Oil price got to $147 a barrel. Exchange rate 118 naira to the dollar. The naira got at one point about 170 naira to the dollar. And the government is basically saying, I have an unlimited pocket and I can hedge you totally and completely against market risks. You can't run an economy now. It is not a subsidy. Now the idea of subsidy is to say, look, I'll pay 25% of the price or 30% of the price. I can understand that. But to say that you will not pay more than X when you're dealing with a product whose price is determined by market forces, a product that you import and therefore driven by exchange rates in a growing population. Now what's the result? Everybody in Nigeria has a second-hand car because fuel is cheap. Everybody. Drivers buy their cars. Okay? And you can't have public transport. It's not profitable because most people have the cars. Fuel is cheap. And you don't just subsidize Nigeria, you subsidize the whole of West Africa. When we removed the subsidy partially, oil price went up in every neighboring country. Okay? In every country. I mean, that is what tells you where the fuel is coming from. In fact, the Ghanaian government, very smartly, when they heard that Nigeria was moving the subsidy, said they were also reducing subsidy by 25%. In other words, because they realized that basically they were not paying. It was cheap fuel coming from Nigeria. There is no way you can tell me that we are consuming 59 million liters a day. The production of 167 million. It's not possible. So where is the fuel going? Now the economics is very clear to me. If you have two markets and you do not separate those two markets totally, you can't seal off Nigeria. We have common borders. I think 26 states in Nigeria have borders with neighboring countries. There is no way you're going to sell fuel at 65 naira per liter in Nigeria and 180 naira per liter in Benin and tell me the fuel is not coming across the borders. And if you go to the border, to the Republic of Benin, you see dozens of petrol stations. There is no population there. The petrol stations are there to facilitate. They fill the tanks, and in the middle of the night, take the trucks and just drive across the border. Meanwhile, we have paid subsidy on the fuel. Okay, you saw the recent public hearings. A vessel comes, they have what they call midstream transfers. The argument is that the Nigerian port cannot take a huge vessel. Therefore, they go to the Republic of Benin and take small vessels from there. But nobody measures. So if you go with 30,000 metric tons, there is no proof that you actually brought in the 30,000 metric tons. You bring in documents. We pay subsidy based on documents. A document. So if I come and say I imported 1 million liters and I can bring documents, you pay me subsidy. No one has actually verified that I brought in 1 million liters. You know the story of a former US ambassador asked why he asks for documents to give Nigerians visa. He said, well, you know, I don't give visas based on documents. If I ask these guys to bring documents, they will bring me the seal of the President of the United States. That's not, if you bring enough in subsidy, they'll purchase the documents. So the subsidy is being paid for by Nigerians, but Nigerians don't realize it because it's the government that's borrowing. Now, who is the government? The government is not a human being. When the Minister of Finance issues a 10-year bond to finance today's consumption, it's 10 years debt incurred that will be paid for by Nigerians, either through taxes paid in the future, or through revenue that should be used for infrastructure, for education, for healthcare. Someone is paying for it. And I think it is that communication that has not been done. People feel when they actually take the money out of their pockets and pay, that is when they pay. But when the government borrows on your behalf, it's taking money out of your pocket. Because you're going to pay. Either through future taxation or through foregone services. And so, if there was a way, I mean, we have these subsidies under the military. But you know, under the military, if you smuggle petroleum products, you go to jail for 20 years. And they have military tribunals. And they locked people up, and no one dared do it. Okay? Now we've got liberal democracy. Now if you've got liberal democracy, you have free markets. You cannot start having arbitrage opportunities in a democracy. The moment you lock up someone for 20 years for smuggling petroleum products, you know, about human rights and civil rights. You know? So the best thing is to just let the market, you know, stop that opportunity. So now on Uganda, what advice do I have for you? Being a physician, heal thyself. You know, are there any Ghanaians in this hall? Yeah. Okay, good. I don't know if you've listened to the Ghanaians. You know what? When Ghanaians discovered oil, every time I go for meetings and Ghanaian ministers are speaking, you know what they say? They say, "Oh, we have found oil, but we are not going to repeat the mistake of Nigeria." And they never say what this mistake was. You know? But the greatest claim of Ghana to good governance in the future is that they will not repeat the mistakes of Nigeria. And I keep saying, what is this mistake you're talking about? But you know, the key thing is, look at what oil has done to Nigeria. Look at the structural problems that oil has caused. I started by saying oil is 13% of our GDP. But it's 80% of government revenue. It's 99% of export earnings. Okay? Nigeria used to be a major exporter of oil palm. Malaysia came and took the palm seeds from Nigeria. Today, it's a major export earner from Malaysia. Malaysia is exporting oil to Nigeria. Nigeria was the major exporter of cocoa. We used to export much more than Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. That is gone. We're a major exporter of groundnuts. We had 40% of the market. We now sell less than Gambia. Okay? Now, the first thing is, don't let oil take you away from your traditional agriculture, and don't lose sight of the secondary sectors. The second is, when you have resources, if you don't have transparency, and I can tell you very, very frankly, one of the major problems I have to deal with as central bank governor is, I don't know if we actually measure how much oil we export. I mean, we say we export 2.1 million liters a day. Who knows? There's no meter. There's no meter system. I really don't know how much oil is exported. We get a number, NFDC says we did 2.1 million, and that's it, you take it. Okay? How did you arrive at 2.1 million? Somebody, or you calculate back, after you've earned the money, then you now say, okay, oil price was $120 per barrel, you divide by the amount. And it's a major problem. Now, even the British, when they put in the metering system, they realized that they were being shortchanged. Because until you can measure what you export, and one of the reasons we have problem with the budget is, we do a budget, and we say $72 a barrel, and we say 2.4 million barrels a day. And month after month, output falls below 2.4 million barrels a day. And therefore, money that was supposed to be saved in excess crude, we take in something called augmentation. Okay? So oil price has not fallen below the benchmark. But we're not saving the money because the output falls short. Why? Oh, there's pilfering, there's bunkering, but okay, how much was pilfered? Nobody knows. Okay, so transparency, extractive industries transparency from the very beginning has to be there, because the oil industry, you know, oil is black, it's dirty, the industry is as dirty as the product. Okay, the oil companies are dirty, the officials who work with them are dirty, I'm telling you. Okay, so if you want to learn, my advice to you is Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Put that from day number one. Then have a constitutional arrangement that forces you to save some of that revenue and set aside for future generations. We have a big problem here, because our constitution says all the money that is earned by the federation should be shared among the states. I and Ngozi and the federal government are saying all prices $120 a barrel, let us save some of it. Because when the price goes up to $50 a barrel, you need to have money to pay salaries. And the governments are saying the constitution says give us our money. And you can't, I mean, that is the constitution. Okay, so you're having this debate where you're trying to convince people who have a timeline of I'm not saying they all want to steal the money, but some of them want to really deliver services in 2 or 3 years. But a politician has an election in 2015. He needs the money, okay, to convince the people that he has delivered. Okay. The problem is that if you give him all the money, if the oil price crashes, the next governor will not have any money to pay salaries. But he's got a constitutional provision that gives him the right to that money. So we can't even compel a saving at the time of high oil prices. We've got to cajole and beg and negotiate and and so on. So have that provision. I think Ghana has done very well by writing the law. At least they've written the law. We're waiting to see what will happen in 20 years when they actually have oil. Because the Ghanaians are making me feel very, very sad. But I want to see in 10 years if they actually don't repeat the mistake. But every international forum we go to, the Ghanaians are like, have fun or we will not repeat the mistake. It's not corruption. Yeah, I think that was part of the all service. Okay, the CFA and POJO. There is a POJO assembly plant in Kaduna, in Nigeria, that has been there for decades. The plan, when the assembly plants were set up, were that would go into import substitution. Okay? I think for decades, we planned import substitution, but somebody forgot that we needed a flat sheets industry. We need steel to produce cars. And because we couldn't find steel, and we had to import, we're importing what are called completely knockdown parts. And the local content was 10%, most of which was paint and water. So we ended up having assembly plants that never could produce cars that were cheaper than the imported cars. Okay, even where you had local parts, the suppliers imported from POJO in France. So POJO Kaduna would buy from somebody who's registered in Lagos a product that he had imported from France and call it local content. It's been privatized now. It's unfortunately its major customer is the government. If the government buys, the government does not buy, he doesn't have. Volkswagen also collapsed. Okay, so the POJO cars are there. They're still being assembled in Nigeria. We buy them in the central bank. We buy some, but it is nowhere near what the vision was. And again, it's about value chains. Question is, should we have gone into automobile assembly if we didn't have steel? Okay, I mean, you can't start producing automobiles if you don't have steel, which is 90% of what you require to build cars. And until we actually move from rolling mills into flat sheets, we cannot have machine tools industries, we cannot have automobile industries. I think we need to have steel industries, but I think that should be the foundation for some of these. On the CFA, my sense is that the CFA is actually tied to the euro right now. It's linked to the euro. The Francophone West African countries have had the unique, to their credit, they've had a very, very low rate of inflation for a long time because of their link to the euro, but unfortunately they've also had no growth. Okay, I don't know what that means. Personally, I would think inflation targeting is a good thing, but if you target inflation to the extent that you don't have growth in an underdeveloped economy, I think you should rethink some of that. I do think Francophone West Africa needs some inflation. It needs to have growth. It needs to create incomes for people. But this focus on a low rate of inflation in an environment of huge poverty and low growth is a big problem for me. But I suppose it is a decision that has been taken by the Francophones themselves, or by the French on their behalf. Now, investment climate and communication is very important. Nigeria does not do enough telling its own story. And people tell our story for us. And I think part of what we need to do as public officers is go out. We don't have to wait until we're doing a Eurobond. One of the reasons I've accepted many speaking engagements, the funny thing is that this year, most of the requests I've gotten have come from universities. I've spoken at the LSE, I've spoken at BS, at Warwick. I'm speaking here next week. I'm going to American University in Beirut. Then I have Oxford. A number of universities are interested in what is happening in Nigeria, what's happening with the banking crisis. How many people know that Nigeria is the only country that's locked up rogue bank CEOs and recovered money after the banking crisis? People don't know that. People don't know that we've set up an asset management corporation that's not just a resolution trust company. It has recapitalized the banks, but not just that, that the banking industry in Nigeria has been given the responsibility of paying the cost of the bailout, not the government. And people are still grappling with whether whether the United States Treasury should pay. Okay, we got the banks. Every bank is going to pay effectively a tax into a sinking fund. They're going to pay for the cleanup. Now these are stories that need to be told. So we have, for instance, a roadshow for AMCON on the 25th of this month in London, where we will sit with investors and actually show them the model, actually let them understand that we have cleaned up the banks in Nigeria at a huge cost, but that cost is going to be borne by the banks themselves. Okay? And we have held individuals responsible for the action. We said that money cannot just disappear. Okay? People have to be held responsible for mismanaging institutions. I always say, people talk about banks failing. That word of a bank having failed, it's a very interesting phrase. You see a man on the roadside, his throat has been slit, and you say the man died. The man was slaughtered, he didn't die. But if you say the man died, then you don't look for who killed the man. You say this man was killed. They're not the murderer. So I say banks don't fail, they are destroyed. I want to know who made that bank fail. Somebody did it. Somebody stole the money. Somebody gave the bad loans. Somebody took the bad decisions. But so failed banks. In fact, some banks are too big to fail. Too big to fail. And we do have, and we did say that in Nigeria our banks are too big to fail. But we also said that our bankers are not too big to jail. And I think it's a story that people need to talk about. I mean, the story of Aroma and her fights with stockbrokers, her fights with the stock exchange, is a story that people don't hear about. And the subsequent fights that she's having, which appear to be fights with other parties, but which are really proxy wars. okay, by the people that she's trying, who are now going around using political authorities to fight. You know, these are all part of the story that need to be told. You know, when you go out and talk about corruption, well, yes, you can talk about corruption, but you can't say that nobody's doing something about it. We are doing something about it. And it's not a country where everything goes. And I think these stories need to be told. And those of you in diaspora, I mean, I go on Facebook and Twitter. Sometimes when I see the kinds of things written about me, I say, oh my God. I just kind of think that many of you in diaspora have a lot of time on your hands. When I want to have fun, you know, I don't know what the run-up was to this, but when I was going to London, just like, guys, come with your eggs. You know, I was going to be pelted in London. Okay, I was lucky to get out of it. But you know, you guys also need to look for the good stories. And I think one of the things that you have is being in an environment where there's education, where you've got a very high level of social discourse. We need to take this discourse away from the banal, either ethnic or interreligious or sensational storytelling that we have in the country into a deeper and more intellectual culture where people begin to understand what we're doing. And we need to basically tell our story. I don't think the Nigerian story is that bad. We want 67 million people. 5% of that is a lot of human beings. It's a lot of human beings. If 5% of Nigerians are bad, that is a lot of human beings. You know, and when people talk about Nigeria, 1 out of every 6 black people in the world is Nigerian. Okay, 1 out of every 5 black Africans is Nigerian. So if a black man is involved in a bad thing, there's 20% chance to get So, I mean, you don't find a Ghanaian or a Botswana. You have to ask how many, what percentage, you know? In fact, if you find a Ghanaian, then there's a big problem because, because 1 out of 5 then means that they're actually more criminal. So we need to have a sense of proportion. Okay? I read somewhere today that Nigeria, I think a few weeks ago, that Nigeria has the largest number of foreign medical doctors in the United States. Okay? I read somewhere about the Nigerians and diaspora being now in the United States, I think, the highest in terms of education. Okay?
Immigrants.
Isn't that is the story we should talk about? Why do we talk about 419 and Boko Haram? And why do we allow ourselves to be represented by the West? You know, and I think that is what we've got to do. And, you know, in December last year, I got an invitation from Queen Beatrix of Holland to go and speak at the Royal Amsterdam Foundation. And I was on a panel with Justin of the World Bank and Martin Wolf. What I found interesting was they asked me to come and speak on what Europe can learn from Nigeria's handling of the banking crisis. And you know, when we had a pre-dinner, pre-seminar dinner with Mrs. Maxima, the president said, you know, we spent centuries telling Africa what to do. And it's a very good change to have Africa come and teach us. And you know, this is a story that we need to tell, you know, as a country. Okay, and we need to actually tell that. So we've got a lot to be proud of. I personally am proud to say, as a central bank governor, that in our country, after the crisis, we locked up some big thieves. Okay, now we recovered money. Okay, and I can stand up in front of all central banks, and nobody can point a finger at me and say, I didn't tamper. We're the first out of the crisis. Everything Europe is doing now, from the 1% money that Bradley is giving, we did in 2009. This stability fund, we did our Hong Kong. Everything they do now, we did 2 years ago. Okay, and we're able to say, well, this time, at least on this one occasion, just like the Asians, look at how Malaysia fixed its crisis. The IMF said, go this way. The IMF said, go right. Mahathir went left. Okay? And he got out ahead of those that followed the IMF. Okay, now the IMF talks about capital controls, may have been very good actually. Maybe SAP was such a very bad idea. I mean, obviously it's like a doctor who's giving you a drug. I've just killed it, so I've made a mistake. But hopefully they will administer the drug again. But I think the Asians did it. Africans need to do it. We need to get to a point where we engage with the rest of the world and actually show that we can think for ourselves. And we can. And we do think for ourselves. What we don't do enough of is speaking for ourselves. Okay? Then you've got corruption. We have corruption. I mean, just a few weeks ago, the British Conservative Party had a funder who was audited to £50,000 for dinner with Mr. Cameron. What is that?
PR.
Corruption. You know? Yeah, so we will fight corruption. I will fight transparency. But we should not allow ourselves to be labeled as the only corrupt people in the world. And if foreigners bribe our officials, those who take are corrupt, those who give are corrupt. Okay? And we need to continue. Now we've got a lot to do to clean up our image. But I really think 90% of the problem of Africa is that we don't tell our story. I mean, look at Tanzania, what they're doing with infrastructure program. Look at Ghana and their bread baskets. Look at Mozambique. Look at Angola, what they've done with their oil industry. Look at Botswana, a small country living on diamonds, and what they've done with their economy. It was for a long time the fastest growing economy in Africa. Look at Ethiopia. In 2 years, Ethiopia will be generating 12,000 megawatts of electricity. There's been transmission lines to provide electricity to Ethiopia, Uganda, and I think Kenya. A lot of good stories in Africa. It's not about poverty and hunger and HIV/AIDS and cholera, you know, which is what we hear about. Okay? It's about governments. I mean, how many people go to Starbucks and know that this coffee actually was grown in Ethiopia? It's a story we should tell. It's an African story. And Nigeria, and I'm the first to say that Nigeria is one country in Africa. To be honest with you, we would like to make Africa proud. If our government isn't doing well, if I have other African countries that are role models, I will go out and speak and blow the trumpet of Africa. If Ghana does well, I'm happy.
You do it properly.
Look at what we did right now. I mean, the Ivorians they're the greatest beneficiaries of the crisis because you know they export cocoa. When people are happy, they take chocolates. When they're depressed, they take chocolates. The crisis didn't affect the cocoa price. People just, they just bought more. So I think we should tell more of our story. Now the final thing is this whole series of questions from this former UBA. Faceless debtors. I don't know what you mean by faceless debtors actually. I think you're talking about.
In our experience in credit recovery in UBA, you go to a particular debtor to recover your debts, and that same debtor is owing like 5 other banks, and so there's no way that banks can tell the credits, the liability of one customer to the other, and I think that is why most of the big banks, so-called, can't lend to the middle market because there's no way they can tell the credit rating of those people. So what is the CBN doing to make sure we have a mechanism to check that?
Well, you know, we do have 3 credit bureaus that have been licensed. Maybe they were licensed after you left for the diaspora. And UBA is actually a shareholder in I think Chopra. And a part of the problem obviously is data. And you've got banks that have had accounts for customers from the 1970s where you don't have full data. A part of our anti-money laundering guidelines okay, have compelled banks to do data cleanup. And therefore the credit bureau are gathering data. It's now easier for you to make an inquiry and to know the number of accounts that a customer has and the number of non-performing loans that the customer has. We still have a long way to go, but we do have credit bureau. And the central bank does have a database, but that is for non-performing loans. And you can always check and confirm the number. You won't know the banks, but we will tell you the number of banks that this customer has facilities with and the number of facilities that are not performing. You can always make that inquiry online. The microfinance institutions are going through reform. Right now, we're at a point where we're getting them to adopt one software so that we can monitor them online. Okay, and then we can bring them together. Leadership in Nigeria, you know, the problem with our country has never been the lack of good people to go into government. And I've always, the reason I don't have any interest in politics is because I don't think the problem we have is a lack of good politicians. What we lack is a strong civil society. You know, politicians everywhere are rotten. You know, they're rotten. But you see, if you come to America, if you go to England, or if you go to France, the reason they are kept on the straight and narrow is because civil society will not take it. Okay? The unions, the judicial system, your churches, your mosques, you know, the journalists. It is civil society that holds political society in check. If a country is willing to take anything, the government will run over the citizens. If citizens stand up, I mean, look at Occupy Nigeria. Okay? It was a very interesting conversation we're having. On the one hand, I am a very strong proponent of removal of subsidy. On the other, I agree totally that we should have greater transparency, that we should know who took the subsidy, and that was fraud, people should be locked up. So we had a situation where, apart from the one point on whether subsidy should be removed or kept, I and Ngozi were in total agreement with Occupy Nigeria. We felt like joining you. Because you were basically saying the kinds of things that some people in government have been saying. How do we know that this subsidy is actually being paid for petrol imported to Nigeria and consumed in Nigeria? And that people have not been taking away the money. I mean, I've said it anyway, one of the people who benefited from subsidies, who wasn't paying his debt to the banks, has come to the United States to buy a polo club. Polo club in America. I mean, that is enough. I don't have proof, okay? But that is rent. You take money from government on fuel subsidy, you don't pay your debt to banks, and you're buying a polo club? That is not a first-rate investment in the United States. I mean, that is going to consume money. So obviously he plans to continue taking subsidy from Nigeria to maintain all the horses and the club there. Because, I mean, you know, this is the kind of thing that you've got to fight against. And it's for, if you didn't have those demonstrations, in 2010, I went before the House of Representatives, in 2010, and I said, I suspect there is a fraud in fuel subsidy. I don't believe these numbers, they're rising too fast. I have a letter written to me on December 16th, 2010, by PPRA, protesting against my casting aspersion on them as a transparent agency of government. Nothing happened when I made that presentation. It was when civil society came out on the streets that public hearings started. But Governor Central Bank, you know, he's eccentric. You know, that's it, you know, you make noise a little, and that's it. But when people come out and say, we want to know, now you're public hearing, okay? Now we've seen on TV, people being asked questions. Now we know, for example, that Customs was never inspecting the vessels, and nobody can tell you how much fuel was coming. Now we know that the vessels were going to Benin. Well, the people in Benin, the front going here, the Benin are. They're taking all the fuel. We're subsidizing. Now we know. Now we know that it wasn't really 1.3 trillion, but 2 point what? And rising. And that in 2012 we're still paying arrears for 2011. Okay, now at least people are beginning to ask questions. And I think what we need is to strengthen civil society so that you hold political society to account. And when we do that, and so if I left this job, and I would be max 2 years, I've always been a member of civil society, and that's what I would like to be. I'll be more useful to Nigeria just being a nuisance to politicians than joining them. Thank you.
On behalf of Colombia, I would like to again thank Central Bank Governor Emilio Sinisi for a hugely engaging speech and for being very indulgent with his time. On behalf of Colombia.
You guys didn't let us ask questions, man. You didn't let us ask questions. Before the podcast, you didn't ask us questions. We didn't have the chance to ask questions.
I wasn't interested.
We were promised that media will ask questions later. We weren't allowed to ask questions.
I see the room is still available.
No, we don't need it. Governor, they didn't ask you a question. That was good. All the reporters, we sent email, that's our email. We sent you email on the line. When you were online, remember? Yeah, we sent you email inquiries as to the allegations.
Okay, which one?
There were questions about the senator from Borno that actually called you a terrorist. I was like, what? So we sent a lot of questions on that. And then the question about the
in order of business, please move towards the reception area. Thank you. Thank you very much. Join us for some refreshments.
Hey, how are you? Yes, I remember. How are you? Oh, okay. Congrats. Tomorrow morning. Yes. All right.
Just to say, let's go. Hello, we met during the IFC stuff last week when this guy Dangote was there. Yeah, Thierry was going up. I was there. And I'm from Pan African University. Lagos University.
Okay, thank you much again. Thanks for nice to meet you. I went to the
Are you guys ready?
Yes. You want to get the room ready? Yeah.
Join us in the reception area.
Join us in the reception area. Like this lady, she needs to come to she said she want to get the chair with him and then the whole group with him. Right. Please join us in the reception area. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some great food for you.
I wanted to. I tried hard.
So, Ruma, how are you doing? How are you doing? Reporters, how are you?
I see some great opportunity. I want to work with you and bring that. Thank you very much.
doing, Mr. Roma? How are you?
It's good. It's good. I'm trying to bring out something from my handbag. I changed handbags. Oh, fantastic.
So the next time I end up
Absolutely. Thank you. It's great to see you. Thank you very much.
So how is the investigation going? The investigation, I remember it's still going on with the Assembly, National Assembly.
I'm not
with you and the chairman of a committee.
Well, I'm not doing an investigation, so I don't know how it's going. Maybe you know.
Okay. So you're speaking tomorrow, right? You're speaking tomorrow?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were aware of it. We are Republic reporters. We are based in New York City.
Sorry, you're...
Republic reporters.
Okay. Yes. Great to meet you.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us.
I'm not sure. It's tomorrow. She's still in the hall.
No, somebody's going to get the room.
Okay. It's a woman.
No, I mean, I came here for you, so
I needed to just get
keynote speech, speaker of today, and
just make general statements.
Speech. At Golden University Business School.
Yes. Are you guys ready for us, please? Yes. Because it's going to be very quick. We have to go.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Only your committee members. Right?
Yeah.
Just the committee members.
Just the committee.
No,
taking pictures. Each of them taking pictures. That's it. Only your committee members, please. We got to go. Let's.
I was asked.
You want to take note?
Here, how many are you? Yeah, because here you have the light pyramid, or here is fast. You can be in the middle and you have to go around him. How many members are you? How many are you?
Excuse me, committee members, please. He can bring your camera. He can take his pictures too. Please, why don't you stay? Please, let's call the committee members, please. We gotta vote.
Committee members.
It's tomorrow night now.
Please, can you guys stay? All right, committee members, please. With pictures,
Okay,
we have to
the
go.
tallest one in the back, the shortest one up front. Yeah. So if you can see in your back, that would make things easier. Get closer, please, if you can. Are you? Yeah. Let's back up, guys. You're gonna be in the shot.
Everyone this way.
Can I have everyone here, please?
So it feels like to be famous. And then one more.
Paparazzi.
There you go. You're the queen of them. One more. Here we go.
You have a good?
Oh, it's downstairs.
This is what's called my comfort zone.
Get closer, ladies. Let's do it by turn, so it's easier. Let her go first. Everyone here, please.